Texans Kris Boyd explains tossing helmet. Shoving coach. I was lit. The Houston Texans divisional round playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs started with a high-energy kickoff return by Nikko Remigio, who took the ball 63 yards deep into Houston territory before being tackled by Texans cornerback Kris Boyd. However, the sequence that followed would quickly spiral into an eventful moment for Boyd, marking the beginning of a game he would not soon forget. The penalty and the helmet throw. After Boyd's tackle on Remigio, which forced a fumble, the Chiefs would recover it. Boyd threw his helmet in frustration. This emotional reaction resulted in a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty against the Texans. The penalty brought the Chiefs closer to the red zone, where they ultimately converted a 32-yard field goal by Harrison Butker. This early mistake was not ideal for a Texans team hoping to pull off an upset in a tough playoff matchup. Boyd, clearly upset with the situation, headed to the sideline, but the drama didn't stop there. The shove to special teams coach Frank Ross. As Boyd made his way off the field, he shoved special teams coordinator Frank Ross. The shove was more than a minor nudge. It appeared to be a full-on push. Likely in the heat of the moment, it wasn't the kind of look the Texans were hoping for early in the game, especially from a player who should have been focused on the game at hand. However, the situation seemed to calm down quickly as Boyd later took the field again after a game-tying field goal by Texans kicker Ka'imi Fairbairn, and the controversy surrounding his actions started to fade into the background. Boyd explains his actions after the game. After the game, which ended in a 23-14 loss for the Texans, Boyd reflected on his actions and offered some insight into what had led to the helmet throw and the shove. According to Boyd, it was simply a rush of emotion that got the better of him. I was turned, Boyd admitted, acknowledging the emotional high he was on after what he thought was a key play for his team. First play, kickoff. They thought they had a big play. And I got the ball out. And as I'm getting up, I look at the screen. I see nothing but white. And they're all pointing that way. Boyd thought the Texans had secured a turnover. And in his excitement, he was ready to celebrate. So I was like, we got the ball. 2. Turnover. I was just turned. You'll see. I ran up to everybody, getting ready to shake their hand. But then someone grabbed me and was like, hey, nah, that's not good. You got a flag and it's their ball. The shove and the coach's calmness. Regarding the shove of coach Frank Ross, Boyd was quick to clarify that it wasn't an act of disrespect. Instead, it was simply a moment of high energy. According to Boyd, the interaction between him and Ross was a normal part of their relationship, with the coach trying to calm him down and refocus him for the rest of the game. I love everybody here. I love my coaches. I would never disrespect nobody. Boyd said, I love Frank. I'm a God-fearing man. I respect everybody in that building. Who is Kris Boyd? Kris Boyd is no stranger to NFL fans, though he's perhaps not a household name. The cornerback was drafted in the 7th round of the 2019 NFL Draft, picked 217th overall by the Minnesota Vikings. He spent 4 seasons with the Vikings before signing with the Arizona Cardinals at the beginning of the 2023 season. Midway through the 2023 season, Boyd joined the Texans. In his 6-year career, which spans 81 games, Boyd has primarily contributed on special teams. He has accumulated 105 tackles, 3 passes defensed, 2 forced fumbles, and 5 fumble recoveries. While Boyd's role on defense hasn't been as prominent as other starters, his special teams play has been a steady part of his contribution to the Texans. In conclusion, Kris Boyd's early game outburst may have grabbed headlines, but it didn't define the Texans' playoff loss to the Chiefs. Boyd himself clearly recognized the importance of keeping his emotions in check, and his post-game explanation showed genuine remorse for his actions. Despite his early frustration, Boyd expressed his deep respect for his coaches and teammates. The Texans now look ahead to next season, hoping that moments like this serve as learning experiences and motivate them to improve, both mentally and strategically, as they aim to bounce back stronger in 2024. Boyd's fiery passion can certainly be an asset on the field. He just needs to keep it in check when the stakes are this high. Texans CB Kris Boyd shoves special teams coach after Houston gives up long kickoff return versus Chiefs. The Houston Texans' opening 13 seconds in their AFC divisional round game against the Kansas City Chiefs were nothing short of chaotic: a play breakdown, a dumb penalty, and even a shove from a player to a coach. Talk about an eventful start. Things got off on the wrong foot for the Texans right out of the gate. The Chiefs' Nikko Remigio took the opening kickoff and ripped off a 63-yard return, setting Kansas City up with excellent field position. Texans cornerback Kris Boyd was the man who eventually brought him down, although not before he forced a fumble, which the Chiefs thankfully recovered. At that point, Boyd's emotions took over. Boyd's outburst. In a bizarre and unnecessary sequence, Boyd flung his helmet to the ground, which earned the Texans a 15-yard penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct. But that wasn't the end of his outburst. As he walked off the field toward the sideline, Boyd shoved Texans special teams coordinator Frank Ross in what appeared to be an attempt to get past him on his way to the bench. And no, this wasn't some casual tap. Boyd's shove was forceful enough to grab attention and raise eyebrows. Coaches are there to support their players, not to be treated like a post-play obstacle. And this was certainly not the kind of image you want to project, especially with the cameras rolling. The fallout. How Boyd's actions affected the game. Thankfully, Boyd's teammates stepped up to help calm the storm. The Texans' defense stood tall, preventing the Chiefs from converting the turnover and holding them to a field goal. While it certainly wasn't ideal, the defense did their best to limit the damage after the chaotic sequence, which could have spiraled into a complete disaster. However, Boyd's actions set a dismal tone right at the start of the game. Instead of the Texans getting the momentum, it felt like a clear sign that they weren't ready for the high stakes of facing the defending champions. Their first 13 seconds were a far cry from what they hoped for, and it put them on their back foot before the game had even really begun. Boyd's apology after the game, which ended in a 23-14 loss for the Texans. Boyd was clearly regretful about his actions. He addressed the incident with reporters, offering an explanation for what had happened. "I was just too excited. Did something that I shouldn't have done," Boyd admitted, clearly recognizing that his emotional outburst was uncalled for. Boyd later added that he had already patched things up with Frank Ross. "I love everybody. Like I said, I was lit. I was turned. I thought we had a good play," Boyd explained, "and I apologized to everybody. I apologized to Frank." It's good to see Boyd take accountability for his actions, though this wasn't the kind of distraction the Texans needed when they were already facing a tough matchup against the high-powered Chiefs offense. A costly start to a long road. The Texans were hoping to pull off an upset against the Kansas City Chiefs, but that opening fiasco set the tone for a rough start to their playoff journey. While Boyd's actions didn't completely sink Houston's chances, they certainly didn't help. The emotional outburst only added to the feeling that the Texans weren't quite in control of the moment, and the Chiefs were more than ready to take advantage of every opportunity. At the end of the day, the Texans fell short, but it wasn't for lack of effort. The loss may have stung even more knowing that they could have used a more disciplined, focused start to put the pressure on the Chiefs from the get-go. Boyd, for his part, may have learned a valuable lesson about composure in high-stakes games. As for the Texans, they'll have to pick themselves up and use this experience as fuel for next season. But for now, the image of Boyd's shove on Ross will be the lasting memory of what could have been a much more promising beginning for Houston's playoff aspirations.